That picture that's being passed around, that was part of the intention. It's in the middle of the page on the top. Takes up 2 pages. So let's continue again. Verse 23. For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like a man who looks at his natural face in a mirror. For once he has looked at himself and gone away, he has immediately, he didn't say in an hour or 2 or whatever, he has immediately forgotten what kind of person he was. He was? That's in the past tense, isn't it? Okay. Verse 25, but one who looks intently at the perfect law, the law of liberty, is that what we live under? Is the law of liberty? Yes, it is, isn't it? What is liberty? Freedom. Freedom from what? You got freedom of choice, don't you? Who makes the choice? Yeah. So, Belva, if you're through with that, I would like to, there's one other person that's come in, I'd like to see that picture. Well, let me grab the book and pass it back to someone back there right quick. I'll be right back. Finish reading the last part of James here. Verse 26 again. If anyone thinks himself to be religious and does not bridle the tongue, but deceives his own heart, this man's religion is priceless. It's worth a whole bunch of money, isn't it? Is that how the scripture reads? What's the last word of the sentence? Worthless, useless. What good is your religion if you don't practice it? Verse 27, pure and undefiled religion in the sight of our God and Father is this, to visit orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself unstained by the world. Okay. Now that everybody in here has seen the picture except BC, I'll show it to BC after the lesson, but in his mind's eye, I can paint the picture for him. Does anybody recall the fellow that was standing up while everybody else was doing what? They were praying. Public prayer, wasn't it? Take a wild guess who that guy was that was standing up. It was me. Why would I do that? I'm up here running my mouth on Sundays. Why would I do something like that? Everybody else is bowed down. This took place before every baseball game. The coach, he was a good man. Good man. He's one of the best men I've ever known in my life. Devout Catholic. And I'm not picking on any of that. But why am I standing up? Don't be afraid to say it. Am I atheist? Well, I'll tell you what. Let's turn over to Matthew 6. Anybody know what Matthew 6 is? Let's just pick verse 1 first. It says, this is Jesus speaking. He says, beware of practicing your righteousness before men to be noticed by them. Otherwise, you have no reward with your Father who is in heaven. Wow. How many times do we have prayers before big football or baseball games and other athletic events and whole sorts of things? Okay? But let's just drop down to verse 5. And this is what that young man was thinking when he would stand up every week or every time we would play. It says, when you pray, you are not to be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and on the street corners. And why? The why is, why are you not supposed to do that? And he answers his own question. So that they may be seen by men. Now, I know the full intention of this is that it's an actual prayer. Now, how many of the ball players actually would listen to it, who would give it, I do not remember. Sometimes the coach would, sometimes he wouldn't. But the intent was there. Okay? But what does intent do for us? Why don't we do that in the locker room instead of out on the field of play? To continue, it says, truly I say to you, they have their reward in full. But when you pray, go into your inner room, close your door, and pray to your Father who is in secret, and your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. I in no way intended to make myself into a public spectacle by doing that. But what I was thinking was, it's what Jesus told us to do with prayer. And I'm quite sure that some of the teammates that may have noticed what I did were going, what is a Kelley? Is he an atheist or what? But how many of those young men were adhering to what Scripture said? Or do we take it literally, or we just kind of toss it around a little bit and make it fit the situation? What about prayer in the confines of this building? How much thought have you ever given that? It took me quite a bit of thought, because I remember the first time I did it, and probably pretty much every time after that, I'd break into a sweat. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, in private, I've been guilty of taking a knee, if not both knees. Used to see a man, if I remember right, his name was J.C. Wilkie, ran a plumbing place in Knox City. And he would give a prayer. And it did not bother me one bit to see a man take a knee and give a prayer in public. Because after all, what are we told? Every will bow, every knee, every one of us. So again, I adhered to this. I think the best course of action was to do what it says. Yeah, Andy. No. Yeah. Yeah. Well, what are the things? Why would you want to take a knee? Why would you want to take a knee when you pray? Absolutely. Respect. You're my creator. I'll humble myself in front of you. See, this is one of the things that we forget about a lot is respect for our creator and to be humble. And there's nothing wrong with being humble in front of other people out of respect to them. A lot of people won't respect it. They'll just think, what kind of whack job is this? I can run all over this guy. He's a wimp. How much courage does it take to stand up to do these sort of things? And like I say, I break into a sweat sometimes thinking about this. Because what do my teammates think of me? What does the coach think of me? Yeah. They that or they've just been told to do it. We would talk about religion from time to time. Let's just put it this way: he was a staunch Catholic. Yeah. Do what? Say again? No, that's just kind of a made up thing. In fact, whenever I first moved to the valley, and the first time I saw that, I kind of went, "What is going on here? What are all these people wandering around with this dot, this thing on their in between their forehead?" I didn't know. Honestly, I had to ask my wife, "What is that?" What's Ash Wednesday? Oh, that's a. So I this is really the first time I've ever really talked about that, especially publicly. But again, I come back to, well, we'll just pick on that particular subject. Why is that participated in? Where does it occur in Scripture? Has someone been blinded by something else? And that's the point behind a lot of this. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Well, to continue this just real quick, I wanted to get to a part of Corinthians I wanted to read right quick, but I wanted to finish this. In Matthew 7, let's just continue this, or Matthew 6 and verse 7, it says, "When you are praying, do not use meaningless repetition as the Gentiles do, for they suppose that they will be heard for their many words. So do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask Him." Now, is He saying don't ask? No. But He just says, He already knows what you're going to ask. Verse 9, "Pray then in this way, Our Father who is in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. And do not lead us into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever." And that's the sort of thing that ran through my mind with the public prayer. Okay? Now, I use myself as an example of this, and I know that I'm probably a very poor example. But if you would, turn to 2 Corinthians in the 10th chapter. Was Paul ever blind? For how long? Literally, he was blind, wasn't he? Do you suppose he was blind before those 3 days? He was represented. He actually got a full dose of actually being blind. He was raised from a kid to be that. Remember, he talked about it. I was raised in one of the strictest of all the sects, and that's Pharisees. But how were they misguided? For how long were they misguided? So, with Paul, in digging around in all of this, Paul wrote several letters. And they're almost certain that there are three. But 1 Corinthians 2 and 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians are actually supposed to be letters. And in reading some of this, doing a little research, some people seem to think that 2 Corinthians was the actual first letter. Okay? So with Paul, why is he writing to the Corinthians? We go back to what we talked about at the very first in the kind of the semi-history lesson from last week, early this morning. What's happened to the church in Corinth? That's one of his primary things here. He's there to establish churches, to bring us to Christianity. What was going on in Corinth? Constantly, every day, 7 days a week. What was about the temple, the prostitution, the drinking, the sailors, all the wild times. And then Paul comes to town and the church gets established. But then the church starts to change. You might pose this question in your mind. How come there are so many churches? Different flavors of churches. On my way over here, I passed by the Catholic Church, then what used to be a Baptist church, and then another church is right across the street, the Church of the Nazarene, and then there's one over here on the corner, the Presbyterian Church. I mean, I pass a whole bunch of churches coming over here. Some of them are gone now. One Church of Christ that I attended way back before I came here, it's gone now, and it's some other, I don't know what that kind of church is. I don't know. In the Bible, what is the church? What's the name given to the church? I've seen two names given to it. Church of God and Church of Christ. Who paid the price for the church? So, in this, one of the things I wanted to talk about Paul was extremely upset when he wrote these letters because he's going, what are you doing? What's going on here? So he literally has to not redo, but present all the evidence back to these people to make them think. What had happened to these people? They allowed themselves to become blinded, didn't they? Blinded to what? To their own selves. They were blind about the reason why they became a Christian in the first place. Did they forget the words? Or did they just kind of find a way to conveniently do an end around, so to speak? And the purpose behind this blindness is, how many of us do this? And is it on a regular basis? Or is it every once in a great while? Being blind. So if we just pick up here with these thoughts of Paul, let's see if we can get through this in about 3 or 4 minutes. This is 2 Corinthians, the 10th chapter. He says, now I, Paul myself, urge you by the meekness and gentleness of Christ. I am meek when face to face with you, but bold toward you when absent. I ask that when I am present, I need not be told with the confidence with which I propose to be courageous against some who regard us as if we walked according to the flesh. For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but divinely powerful for the destruction of fortresses. Verse 5. We are destroying speculations and every lofty thing raised up against the knowledge of God. What was our very first example of going against what God told someone to do? It only took two people. The first two people on earth went right against what the knowledge that they had. And what was that knowledge? Don't touch it. Don't eat of it. Simple instruction. What happened? Serve self, just like James talks about. Why are we here? Why are we here? Partly to serve self. Because after all, when this bag of bones disappears, what's left? Yeah. And to be perfectly honest with you, the only thing that you actually own is the power of choice. You think you boil it right down to the very existence. We are God's possession, whether we like it or not. And He's got the choice of what He wants to do. And remember, I always remember that lesson that Kelley gave 2 times on justice. He is just in what He does. Did He not warn us? How often did He warn us? Thousands of years, right? Power of choice. Okay. Verse 5, we'll finish up here. I'll just go through the end of this paragraph and then we'll stop. Verse 5, we are destroying speculations and every lofty thing raised up against the knowledge of God, and we are taking every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. And we are ready to punish all disobedience whenever your obedience is complete. Now, I can't help myself. I've got to read just another sentence or two. You are looking at things as they are outwardly. If anyone is confident in himself that he is Christ, let him consider this again within himself, that just as he is Christ, so also are we. For even if I boast somewhat further about our authority, which the Lord gave for the building you up and not for destroying you, the implanted word, use it and use it correctly, I will not be put to shame, for I did not wish to seem as if I would terrify you by my letters. For they say his letters are weighty and strong, but his personal presence is unimpressive and his speech contemptible. Let such a person consider this, that what we are in word by letters when absent, such persons we are indeed when present. The point behind this is to take those shutters off your eyes and open up to examine self. I'm pointing directly at myself on this. To help rid yourself of this business of being blind or blinded. All we got to do is turn on TV these days. And you get a good dish of being blinded there. If there's anything I've said that's wrong or in error, please let me know. Any questions, feel free to answer or ask. Maybe I'll have the right, correct answer. Thank you. We got all the way down to 75. 76. We got 75 and 76.